Hello, my name is Coriell, and I would like to speak about medical cannabis. Imagine your child's doctor has just told you that your baby has an inoperable brain tumor. Your choices are chemotherapy and radiation treatments that in themselves could kill your child. Imagine the frustration at your lack of options, at the hopelessness that you can't help your baby. What if there were other options, a natural option that has never in its 3,000-year history killed anyone directly? What if you were told that if you used this natural and safe option, you would go to prison for child abuse simply trying to save your child's life? Cannabis is a plant that has so many benefits it makes you wonder why it would be illegal. It is a Schedule I narcotic listed right along with heroin and cocaine. But why? This plant has never killed anyone in its long history of medical and spiritual use. Treatment with cannabis has shown to shrink tumors and stop cancer growth. It treats intractable pain without the nasty side effects of opiates. Cannabis has shown to hinder the advancement of Alzheimer's. People have seen the benefits of treating their depression and PTSD symptoms with cannabis. It's confusing since the U.S. government says it's a terrible addicting drug, yet holds the patent for certain conditions to be treated with cannabis. I would like to discuss the laws and prohibition and the penalties associated with cannabis. Then I'd like to talk about the patent the government holds, the different treatments with cannabis of various health conditions. Last, I'd like to review the ability to obtain cannabis and patient quality of life, keeping people stuck with treatments that in some cases make them sicker than they were in the first place. In 1850, cannabis was added to the U.S. pharmacopoeia to treat neuralgia, tetanus, cholera, rabies, opiate addiction, anthrax, alcoholism, or uterine bleeding, among others. Cannabis was endorsed in 1889 by The Lancet to treat opium withdrawal. By 1918, the U.S. was able to grow and produce 60,000 pounds annually of equal quality cannabis due to inability to import from India, which had been the U.S. source until World War I. In 1937, the U.S. government proposed the Marijuana Tax Act during the Committee of the Ways and Means during April 27th through May 4th, 1937. Dr. William C. Woodward, who was legislative counsel for the American Medical Association, was the last to testify and wanted it to be clear that they did not support this legislation. That was the beginning of the prohibition of cannabis, which was secured finally in 1970 by the Controlled Substances Act. This is when cannabis was listed as a Schedule I narcotic, meaning it has no accepted medical use. This occurred despite the 1972 Schaefer Commission report that recommended removing marijuana from the scheduling system and decriminalizing it. President Nixon rejected their recommendations. On October 2, 1937, the FBI and Denver, Colorado police raided the Lexington Hotel and arrested Samuel R. Caldwell, 58, and Moses Baca, 26. On October 5th, Caldwell was the first marijuana seller convicted under U.S. federal law. His customer was found guilty of possession. Caldwell was sentenced to 4 years of hard labor in Leavenworth Penitentiary, plus a $1,000 fine. Baca received 18 months. Both men served every day of their sentences. In 1956, Congress included cannabis in the Narcotics Control Act of 1956. That resulted in stricter mandatory sentences for cannabis-related offenses. A first-time cannabis possession carried a minimum sentence of 2 to 10 years with a fine of up to $20,000. In November 1976, a Washington, D.C. man named Robert Randall, who was affected by glaucoma, used the little-used common law doctrine of necessity to defend himself against criminal charges of cannabis cultivation, the U.S. versus Randall. On November 24, 1976, federal Judge James Washington ruled Randall's use of cannabis constituted a medical necessity. Judge Washington dismissed criminal charges against Randall. Now that I've gone over the very confusing history of cannabis's medical use and prohibition, I would like to go over the discovered uses and outcomes of cannabis being used to treat different conditions. First, I'd like to point out that our government holds patent US 6,630,507b1 for the therapeutic use of cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. The abstract states that cannabinoids have been found to have antioxidant properties. The cannabinoids are found to have particular application as neuroprotectants and help in the treatment of neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's disease. 28 years after the discovery of THC, in 1992, Dr. McCollum, along with Dr. William Devane and Dr. Lemire Hannes, identified the brain's first endogenous cannabinoid, or endocannabinoid, the brain's natural version of THC, which they call anandamide. It is explained that the runner's high you get from exercise is your body's production of endocannabinoid. It has been shown that these endocannabinoids aid in the treatment of conditions such as PTSD and other psychological conditions. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs released a Veterans Health Administration Directive, 15 KB, on July 22, 2010, saying that veterans who participate in legal and state medical marijuana programs will no longer be disqualified from substance abuse programs, pain control programs, or other clinical programs. It has been shown that cannabis and cannabinoids may be useful in treating the side effects of cancer and cancer treatment. Other possible effects of cannabinoids include anti-inflammatory activity, blocking cell growth, preventing the growth of blood vessels that supply tumors, and antiviral activity. The ability to treat the side effects of traditional treatments of cancer aid in the quality of life for the patient. Cannabis is shown to alleviate the pain and nausea associated with chemotherapy and radiation. The prevention of the growth of vessels that supply tumors and blocking cell growth are important to the hindrance of the cancer progressing and spreading to an untreatable level. Cannabis may offer hope to people with autoimmune disorders, such as lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Cannabis seems to decrease inflammation in the body by suppressing certain parts of the immune system. It is shown that cannabis lowers levels of inflammation-promoting protein interleukin-2 and raises levels of the anti-inflammatory protein interleukin-10. Both of these findings could be a potential benefit for treating autoimmune disorders one day. Cannabis also treats the pain and fatigue associated with these disorders, improving the patient's quality of life. Let's take a look at the bigger picture of the quality of life for the cannabis patient and the obstacles to attaining their medical cannabis. Quality of life improves with the alleviation of symptoms and conditions and side effects of pharmaceutical treatments. It can be difficult to safely obtain cannabis due to the laws that are in place at the federal level, and the alternative of going to a black market dealer is sometimes not an option for patients living in states that do not have state laws protecting them. The best way to reverse this issue is for the public to become informed and let the lawmakers know that this vital plant should be rescheduled from a level 1 narcotic. Today I described how cannabis has been irrationally prohibited by our government for medical uses by showing how wishy-washy they have been on the criminalization aspect and the studies that have been ignored. Then I explained just a few of the various conditions, symptoms, and side effects that cannabis can treat effectively, and finally how the quality of life of a patient is affected just trying to obtain and possess cannabis. There must be change in the schedule of cannabis for the availability and study of this vital and natural option. It shouldn't be so difficult to obtain a natural remedy that has never hurt anyone and has so many benefits. Thank you for listening to my persuasive speech on medical cannabis.